All right, we have arrived. It is 4:55 a.m. The race starts in 5 minutes, so just barely made it on time, and I still need to attend the pre-race meeting and get my bib on. But we are here in Ashburnham, Massachusetts. The sun is starting to come up, but we still need a headlamp.
Reflective tape just to the almost to the peak of Waitatic. You don't go to the peak. Actually, there's a person there. If you haven't seen a yellow triangle in a couple of maybe 100 yards or so, backtrack. There are trails off of it. All right, have a good race out there. Ready, set, and go!
All right, we are out here today in Ashburnham, Massachusetts for a race called the Trail Animals Running Club WAPAC and Back. And this race has 3 different distances. You can run a single pass of the trail called the WAPAC Trail that is 21.5 miles long, or you can do 2 passes of the trail where you go out and back, and that is 43 miles long. Or there is a 50-mile distance for those who like a nice round number, where you do the 43-mile out and back, and then you turn around again and do 7 miles up and over Mount Waitatic, which is one of the mountains on this trail. This trail consists of several small mountains here in northeastern Massachusetts, right on the border of New Hampshire. And I believe the 43-mile distance has about 10,000 feet of elevation gain in total climbing. So a good bit of elevation, and I try to do this race every year. I did it last year, the year before, where last year it took me about 12.5 hours to complete. This year I'm hoping to do better than that, but I'm also not here for any goal, just out here to enjoy the day, get some solid training in on some beautiful trail in the mountains, and just enjoy it. Now, the field size at this race is pretty small. Not a lot of people run the 43 and 50 mile distance here. There's only, I think there are only like 35 or 40 people on the starting list, and I was one of them. And I think the 21.5 mile race is much more popular because it's a more reasonable distance on this kind of terrain. And for that race, you have to park at the finish line, basically where I started, and then take a school bus to the northern terminus of the trail where you start and then run back. So it's a pretty interesting format. The weather today looks pretty good. Actually might be a little bit too warm. Forecast was in the 40s in the morning, but later today it's gonna rise to mid 70s, could close in on 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty warm for this time of the year here in New England. But I like warm weather. I'm just gonna have to remember to keep drinking, stay hydrated. I haven't spent a ton of times on technical trails lately, so I gotta make sure to keep my feet under me. There are some pretty technical portions of this trail with lots of roots and rocks, and so gotta make sure I stay on top of things, stay sharp, and maybe don't look at this camera too often so I don't trip and fall. We are currently just a couple of miles in, just passed over the peak of Mount Waitatic, and got a long day ahead of us, so just trying to keep a smile on, stay optimistic, and keep moving.
Your water here, different Ohio.
Long.
Huge, man, the huge. I know you're there's no stranger.
You were in my
game.
video last time.
Was sometime last year. To the day, about.
All right, we are at mile 12 right now. And
sorry, I'm still not sure about that.
okay, Siri. And I have slowed it down quite a bit because there is a lot of climbing in this race. I was just running with a guy named Chris for like the past like 9 miles, chatting it up, which was nice. Passed some time, but he was moving too quick for me, so I had to let him go. I'm using Garmin Climb Pro right now, so you can actually see the climbs ahead. You can see that green portion is the climbs I've already done, and the blue portion is the climbs I have ahead. So there's a lot of climbing left in this race. I've decided to pump the brakes a little bit. Again, this is not, you know, a goal race, an A race. So just kind of chilling, catch my breath, taking some electrolytes, and then get cruising again. This climb in particular is pretty big. So I'm tired. I just realized how annoying this probably is to listen to. Me wheezing, talking while climbing up a hill. So sorry about that. All right, we are 14.5 miles in on the Wapak Trail, and I don't know what happened, but my stomach has kind of turned sideways. Not feeling too hot. I don't know if it's something I consumed, like drank or ate. I didn't really eat anything yet, but just not feeling great. I'm struggling to run at this point. Gonna slow it down quite a bit. Hopefully I can turn this around and keep on trucking. You can see the next mountain that I'll be climbing. This little dirt road brings us all the way down to a road crossing, and then we start our climb up that big guy there. That'll be fun. All right, we are at mile 16.5. I just passed through the last aid station before the turnaround. I refilled my waters, actually drank a whole water, refilled, and then put it back. So I've cameled up a little bit because the next stop is 5 miles away to the turnaround, and then it's up and over a big mountain, so it's gonna take a while to get there. I'm moving really slow and I'm feeling pretty awful. I don't know what's going on, but I've got these stomach cramps. My legs are cramping. I'm feeling like oddly dehydrated, and I've been drinking a ton. It's just not my day so far. Not feeling great, so I'm gonna walk it out for a while. Unfortunately, this is a gnarly climb coming up, and actually it's just coming into view. That's the auto road if you want to drive a car up the mountain, and this is the trail that goes up this mountain, and it is it's a doozy of a climb. Basically just a rock scramble to the top. We're just gonna slowly get through this. Hopefully on the descent on the other end I can be running again and not crawling like I have been, because who wants to watch a video about me suffering? Actually, it's probably more entertaining than me not suffering. I don't know. There's the view we've been waiting for. That's a nice view. Finally some clearing, and it's time to start our descent. Mile 17.5. Onward, taking a little moment to take in the view. Well, this is awkward. This is probably not the person you were expecting right now. There was Dave on the trail a few minutes ago, and now we have Dave in the studio because, spoiler alert, I did not finish this race. At the end of the day, I did not finish. This is a DNF for me, my second DNF ever. I think I've run like 40 ultras, 30 ultras at this point. I don't know. I'd have to count the bibs on the wall behind me. and I've only DNF'd once before, and I'm not proud of it. It's pretty upsetting and it's pretty disappointing for me. However, even though I did DNF at this race, I think it was for good reason. When I got to the turnaround point at mile 21.5, I knew I had an option to get out of there because the aid station crew was going to be breaking down their aid station. They'd be able to give me a ride. Now, if I turned around and went back in dehydrated with stomach and leg cramps and just not feeling good, and if I found myself in a position where I really needed to stop for the safety of myself, I may not have been able to do that because finding a car ride out of this situation is pretty difficult at this kind of race. So what happened at the Trail Animals Running Club Wapak and Back 50 miler? Well, I signed up for the 50-mile race. I had full intention of running 50 miles that day, but I think a few things went wrong along the way that I want to talk about now as sort of my lessons learned and what I'm taking away from this race. The first lesson I took away from this race was thinking about my activities leading up to the race and not just thinking about race day. And the reason why I say that is because this race took place on a Saturday. And the Friday before the race, I, for some reason, decided to do a bunch of yard work around the house. I was outside all day. It was very hot out. It was in the 80s. I was sweating, doing yard work. And why this relates to my race day is because this was one day before the race. When I was outside doing all that yard work, I was not drinking enough water. I actually got a bit of a sunburn while I was out there, and I just wasn't taking care of myself leading up to the race. I should have been resting, taking it easy, and pre-hydrating like crazy. I should have been drinking water all day to just get a good base of hydration before the race actually started. The other lesson I took away from this race was not trusting the hydration mix that's used at the aid stations at the race. I mean, it's great that they actually have a hydration mix that's there and available for everyone to use for free, basically, with the inclusion of your registration. But for me, I like a pretty concentrated mix of electrolytes, and I found that the mix that they were using at the aid stations was kind of weak, and they were using a different product that I'm typically used to. And the funny thing is, I actually had hydration mix in my bag and available to use, but I didn't want to waste the time and stop and tear open the bag and use that mix, and that ultimately didn't help me out in the end. And the final lesson that I took away from this is a lesson I'm taught every time I go to a race, and it's to slow down early. Walk hills early. This race in particular was extremely rugged, 50 miles long and over 10,000 feet of elevation gain, and most of that elevation gain is happening on very technical terrain. There's big boulders and rock scrambles, and it's a very challenging course. And that may be subjective to me because I live in this area. I'm sure you have harder races that you've run out there, but for me, this race is very challenging. So what I should have done is dialed back my pace early because I knew what was coming. I've run this race before. I knew that the harder terrain came later in the race. At around that 17-mile point is when it gets really hard. And what I did was I gassed too early. I had my foot on the gas. I was hanging out with people and trying to run with them and chat with them. And those people were just too fast for me. I should have realized that and dropped them and just started walking earlier to preserve myself for the harder miles later in the race, which I did not do. So this time around, yes, I did not finish, but I did take away a valuable set of lessons that I will apply at my next race. And for that, I am thankful, and I did get to spend a lot of quality time in the woods and in the mountains, so there's that. And with that, we have reached the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed traveling along with me at this race in particular. And if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel down below so you don't miss more videos from me in the future. I've got a lot of race vlogs and things like that planned. Also, make sure to drop down into the description down below. Check out the podcast that I do on a weekly basis in this kind of setting, where I just chat about all the things that have gone wrong at races like this. They're not all like that. Some podcasts are happy too. I also want to give a quick shout out to the race organizers that put this race together every year. I know it's very challenging to do. The volunteers out there, thank you so much for being there. And finally, the person, a woman named Carolyn, who gave me a ride back to my car at the end of this race. Thank you very much for that. Without that, it would have been a very long day, so I appreciate it. And with that, I gotta go. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.